Today on The Guy Walking and Thinking, I'm thinking about the fine-tuning argument for evidence of intent in creation. In the last decade, cosmologists have discovered a set of dimensionless constants. Dimensionless constants are basically things that cannot be derived. There's no explanation why the number is a number. Scientists basically just accept those numbers as almost initiating parameters for the universe. Now, the dimensionless constants are very interesting, and because we have powerful computers today, we can actually model the effect of these constants on the expansion of the universe and also interaction of objects in the universe. And there's about half a dozen dimensionless constants which are considered fine-tuned. And by fine-tuned, we mean that if they had been just slightly different, and when I say slightly, I really mean slightly, I'll go into the actual probabilities later, that the universe would not be the way it is today. One of these constants, for example, known as the cosmological constant, or the energy density constant, is the ratio of density of dark matter to other matter in the universe. Now, that ratio is very tiny. It's 1 divided by 10 to the 122. Just to give you an idea of how big that number is, that's more atoms than there are on Earth or in the visible universe. So it's a tiny, tiny number. And the problem with this number is that if that ratio were even slightly bigger, like say for example, it were half the size or double the size, so we're talking, or even, let's even consider a window of a magnitude of 10. So you'd operate between 10 to the minus 121 and 10 to the minus 123. Then the controlled explosion, which is the singularity, the Big Bang, would not last in its current state in 13.8 billion years. So you would either have a situation where the universe would have imploded within the last 13.8 billion years because the ratio wasn't such that the explosion would continue expanding. And if it had been slightly different the other way, the universe would have expanded too fast and it wouldn't have allowed base elements like hydrogen to create and form things like stars. And of course, the fusion reaction in stars is what created all the elements in the periodic table. And you need the periodic table to allow for chemistry, and you need chemistry to allow for organic chemistry, and you need organic chemistry to allow for the building blocks of life. So we're not even getting into how the building blocks of life somehow spontaneously created replicating mechanisms which kicked off the process of evolution and the survival of the fittest. We're talking about the very initiating parameters that allowed for the formation of stars in a 13.8 billion year old universe. Now, cosmologists admit that it's perplexing. Those cosmological constants could be anything. I mean, it's a ratio of two things, and by definition a ratio can change. No cosmologist is saying that it's the only way it could be. No scientist is making that argument. So there are essentially just two options when considering the fine-tuning of the universe. The first one is intent. A god, if you will. If you witness the manifestation of a 10 to the minus 122 probability and you only have evidence of one opportunity, that is guaranteed evidence for intent. For sure. I mean, it's the equivalent of walking around the corner and seeing 10,000 needles balancing on each other in the wind for 1,000,000 years. It just doesn't happen unless somebody intended it to. The other one, which of course you have to invoke if you don't want to consider intent, is infinite opportunity. So you basically explain a near infinite improbable event from happening by postulating a near infinite multiverse or subverses, therefore creating infinite opportunity, and that can anthropically explain why you happen to be sitting in a universe where the constants were fine-tuned such that you could have the controlled expansion, the formation of stars, chemistry and organic chemistry. The problem with postulating a multiverse, as said by the atheist leading cosmologist Weinberg or even Susskind, is that we have no evidence. We don't even have a theory for a multiverse. We don't even have a hypothesis for a multiverse. We don't even have a model, even parts of a model. And you can YouTube Weinberg or Susskind, who are both atheists, who will admit this. But of course, because they're atheists, they're biased and they have to postulate the multiverse. And they will tell you that this 10 to the minus 122 probability of the cosmological constant is a real problem. And of course, it's very unscientific to postulate infinite opportunity, because essentially what you're doing is you're committing a logical fallacy called the inverse gambler's fallacy. So the gambler's fallacy is, if you're a gambler and you're sitting in a casino and all night you're pulling that slot machine and you've been losing all night, and then you make an incorrect statistical conclusion that because I've been losing all night, my chances of winning are increasing, so I'm going to keep going. That's the gambler's fallacy. The inverse gambler's fallacy is if you walk into a casino and you see somebody hit the jackpot, and then you assume that they must have been there all night. Both are equally incorrect. They're statistically incorrect. So to invoke, to postulate infinite universes to explain an infinitely improbable thing from happening with one opportunity is the inverse gambler's fallacy, which means to postulate intent is more logical than to postulate infinite opportunity. Thank you for watching Guy Walking and Thinking.